I want to make sure I give the Appetite guys a chance to do their thing. So I'm going to hand it off to Tristan and Todd. So please give them a warm welcome.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Is this what he's on? Doesn't matter. Hi, how's it going? It's a good thing there's employment stuff over there because we might need a job in a couple months. So, yep, we're Appetite. We're brand new to Boston. Am I blocking the screen? Probably. Kid, that's the slides for me.
Sure.
I left all my stuff here with me.
So we're brand spanking new. Just like when the Red Sox were, in the World Series, they lit up the Prudential Center. So when we incorporated in January, they lit it up too. Yeah, it's both. Next slide. So I'm Tristan Ashford. I'm the CEO of the company. This is Todd Soule. He's the CTO of the company. We're both engineers at IBM Research for the past 3 years, and we just recently quit our jobs and took the plunge, and now we're doing the whole startup thing under Appetite. And just like the old IBM adage, nobody ever got fired for choosing IBM. Nobody has gotten fired for choosing Appetite quite yet. So I know we're clearly at an API meetup on a Tuesday night, so clearly you guys probably know what an API is, but just to make sure, and for the people on the internet, an API is the buttons, levers, and dials provided to programmatically interact with the system. In other words, it's kind of a way for two software systems to communicate. For example, like I'm from Toronto, so my favorite rapper is Drake. He just dropped his new album. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. But for example, like when you're on, say, CNN.com reading about Drake's album, and you see that little button there saying, share this article, when you click that button, it magically shows up in your Twitter stream. Now, how does that happen? Now, someone doesn't literally log into your account and tweet it for you to communicate. What happens is, next slide. What happens is, like BBC.com, my favorite, talks to Twitter.com using something called an API. They basically send a request saying, send new tweet to TJ Ratch's account with the new text, Drake's new album just dropped. And that's basically kind of how, that's kind of like an example of the web API and how that works. So, Appetite is a cloud service for creating and managing APIs for your data. Basically, if you have a database or a spreadsheet, you can hook your database into a service, and using our GUI, you can go click, 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 or add a SQL query. The coolest part of this is that these kids on the big screen had our API documentation up, and they're like, okay, how can we use this endpoint, or can we join these two endpoints down? And that was really special to us, because we thought, well, that's really cool. A couple of the apps that actually came out of this are interesting. The top left is H.H. Brown Shop. It's basically just a very fancy e-commerce site. It's basically like their e-commerce site existing. The winner actually was Blue Closet. This was an interesting one too. Basically, you would take pictures of the clothes you were wearing, and it would take the dominant color, and then try to find a good color shoe to go with it. So if you're wearing like a red and a black, it would do some color complementing. I don't know, I'm not really a fashion guy, and find like an appropriate shoe to go with it. Shoe Gamble was kind of interesting. It was like a Tinder game where basically they would show you a shoe, and then you get 30% off. And if you didn't like the shoe, you would risk it. For the next shoe, get 20% off. And if you want to risk it again, you get 10% off. That was kind of cool. And then my favorite was Laser Shoe. It was by these high school students. They were great. They didn't even use the API. It was basically a video game of this shoe going up and down and shooting purple dots coming at them. That was my favorite. So right now, Todd's going to give you a demo of how Appetite actually works. And I'm going to hand this off to him.
Thank you.
Any questions at this point?
I've got one.
Yep.
Database impact. You're obviously reporting right now.
Yep.
What's
So
going on there?
I think it'll become a little more clear when we show the demo, but mainly the database impact is how you use the API. So for example, we don't hit the database any more than you do. So if you make an API request, it goes to your database. So that's on you. So if you make 1,000 requests to the API, then that's the impact of the database. Currently we don't do any automation or schema extraction at this point. Now we do like maybe like a call maybe once every hour to check your database is still connected. But beyond that, we typically don't try to host the database at all. It's a good question, though.
So it seems like it's mostly just how you craft your statements.
Yes.
So any batch or if you're relying on existing indexes and stuff, that's really.
Oh, will you say that again?
Yep. Sorry. So it seems like it's just a matter of how you craft your statements.
Yep. So if you make like inefficient statements, then that's exactly that's going to affect the database. And you're going to
And down the line, I mean, there's a lot of stuff we want to do. Again, we've been operating for 2 months, but down the line we want to do rate limiting, things like that, things that a company needs to make sure their database doesn't go down every time someone tries to use the API. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick demo. I'm going to come at it from, I'm going to show you 2 APIs. One is the H.H. Brown one that we made for the hackathon, and then we're going to create together an API using MongoDB. So let's, can I just get a show of hands? Who here would consider themselves technical people? Okay, great.
Good.
Okay, so this is the landing page. I'm logged in already, so let me go to the home. So here you can see we list the APIs that a user manages and the ones that he or she uses. Remember, there are 2 types of roles here. There are the people creating the APIs, and then the people who use the APIs can come to our site to use them as well. They can also do it programmatically, and we'll get to that in a minute. So let's look at the H.H. Brown Hackathon API. So this is the API dashboard. You can see there are 27 users. This is one of the APIs that has private security on top of it. So the users use OAuth to authenticate. You can see the list down here. You can just add users or revoke access to them through their email addresses. And this is the data source. You can add multiple data sources. They were just going off of a sample data set they gave us for the hackathon. Now there are basically, but it's a MySQL database that we've attached to here. And there are basically 2 types of SQL endpoints that you can create. One is really for non-technical people, if you just want to, or technical people who just want to wholesale export a table and maybe select the columns that they want to export. So for instance, let me find the one. If we go to the H.H. Brown shoe catalog endpoint, you see right there, it just connected to the database. It pulled down the list of tables. There's only one here. And then it pre-populated this table preview with the first 10 rows, just so you get an idea of the type of data that you're going to be exporting. And then you can click to select which columns you want to export. Now, again, this is the very simple version. If you wanted to do something more complex, you can create an endpoint that actually issues a custom SQL command. So let's take a look at get shoes by minimum price. So this is a SQL one, and you can see we just entered a very simple select statement. The only thing of interest here is this hash. I hope you can see this.
Can you guys read that from back there? It basically says select star from hhbrown.catalog where price is greater than, and we pass in a parameter. We say hashtag min price. Oh yeah, there you go. Zoom in more.
Yeah, but
yeah, sorry about that. There you go.
And you can see when it's hash sign and the brackets, that forms a parameter. And so when the user wants to then use this endpoint, they just pass in the value for that parameter. So that's, and then you specify the type of value that is. And you can enter a description, which provides sort of some documentation for when the users go to the endpoint page and want to find out how to exactly use this. So let's do that, actually. So if I go now to the hackathon API as a user, I get a list of all the available endpoints to me. Let's go to the price one, get used by minimum price. You can see also in this table that we show you, these are all select statements for the purposes of the hackathon. They're just getting data, but we definitely support inserts, updates, deletes, anything you want to run.
And to be honest with you, we actually probably, like, we haven't tested this, but we support basically all SQL. So if you want to make an endpoint that some reason deletes all your tables, that works. If you have prepared statements, that can come in handy. You can also run those for creation of tables and things like that. You can kind of think of it as kind of like a layer on top of your database.
So there are 2 ways to download data, to use the endpoint. If you're just a user, you don't know much SQL, again, going back to Tristan's like report generation use case, you just come here to the website, you go to the human request tab, and then it'll list all the values or the parameters tell you what types they are, give you the description, and then you just enter some data. Let's say we want to get all the shoes that are $350 or more. You can then download it in JSON or CSV by clicking one of these buttons. It downloads, and then you open it up, and it's, if you have Excel, it's right in your Excel spreadsheet. So it's very easy for the end user to do that.
And all the prices are over $350.
Right, and yes, the query worked. Now, if you want to build an application, you would go to the Programmatic Request tab, and that'll explain how to format your queries, if it's a private endpoint, how to use OAuth to authenticate to, and we'll go through that with the second API we're going to talk about, which is an Appetite Meta API. So this is going to be an API into our very own database that runs the application. So I've already added the data source. Let's go in here because I haven't shown you that.
Can you show the JSON request for the H.H. Brown one?
Sure, yeah. Choose by. So let's do a JSON request. We'll just put it right here, min price. Was 350. Yeah, right. And so with GET requests, you can just type it right into the URL, and you can see the JSON spits out right there. Okay. So now this is I ahead of time made a data source that connects right to our Appetite MongoDB. We run our application on MongoDB. Right now we actually don't support all of these. We support MySQL, Postgres, Microsoft SQL Server, and MongoDB, with support for the other ones coming as sort of as requested. You click Save and Connect, and then it'll tell you if it's connected or if there was an issue. So now let's create an endpoint. So we click Create Endpoint. This endpoint will be the Get Recent Events. Gets the most recent events in the system. And then right here you specify the URL route. This is what people will go to actually get the data. So Get Recent Events. And you specify the data source. There's only one that we've added. So click Add. Then we'll bring you to the Manage Endpoint page. It'll connect to your database and look at, in this case, the collections that you have. So it's populated this with all the different collections. We'll choose events. You can do a find, insert, update, or remove. We'll just stick with the find. And then we give some instructions because MongoDB queries are a little stranger than SQL queries in some respects. So just to help people out. Let's leave the query criteria empty. We can specify how to sort it. Let's do it by created, descending, and let's just limit it to 10. We won't do parameters. Save it, and then, so you just created an endpoint. Now, if I were to go use that endpoint, let's just copy the URL. There, I immediately get back the last 10 events in the system. Now, here's where our thing kind of comes in handy. It comes in handy for quick prototyping and testing and making quick modifications. So let's say I realize I don't want all the events. I just want the errors. So I can go back here, say, no, let's just get it where the category is error. Save it. Go back. If I refresh the page, suddenly it's been filtered by errors. I see the stack traces aren't really helpful right now. I don't want to look at those. So I tell it that I don't want the stacks. Save it, refresh it, and now I've got a list of the 10 most recent errors without their stack traces. And I can add in all sorts of parameters. If I want to do paging, if I were to then create an application that would access this programmatically and I wanted to do paging, I could have a parameter here called skip, See, it just detected that I wrote skip. I could have that be an integer, and therefore it would then skip however many documents that you feed to it when you're making the request. Should we do the OAuth?
Do you guys want to see OAuth? Yeah?
Yeah? Okay. We got one nothing. So let me quickly run you through what it would take to then make these. So far, I've been doing this through the GUI. Now, most APIs are accessed programmatically, and this one is private, so you need OAuth to do so. So to do that, again, you would have someone technical do this, but you would just need to, the first step would be to create an application. So you just go to your API page. You can see a list of registered applications down here. You just click Register App, give it a name. Let's say Todd's Error Logger, app type, click Submit, and it'll give you a client ID and a client secret. And you can revoke access to these applications anytime you want if your secrets get leaked. So you then use these to obtain, and this is standard OAuth 2.0 two-legged procedure. You use these client IDs and client secrets to obtain what's called an access token. And you just take that access token, the programmer takes the access token and sends it with every request they make to the API, and that's the authentication that our system needs to let you know that you do have access. So to get that access token, you would make a post request to here, let's say, and these instructions are spelled out ad nauseum in the documentation, but I just know what they are. So you make a post request, and then you just give it a few fields in the body of the post request. I'm using a Chrome plugin called Advanced REST Client. It just allows you to make HTTP requests. So you just give it the client ID and client secret. And then make the request. And it gives you back an access token. And the access token, because of the type of auth we're using, is long-lived. It'll expire in a year. So you can basically use it for quite a long time. So you want to take the access token. This is what you send with every request. So now if I wanted to go to that error logging thing, I would go to appetite meta / hold on. I just have to get the URL. So then my application would just make requests to this URL. It'll be a GET request since it's a find query. You give it an authorization header and the token. And there you've authenticated, and therefore you get back your results. So that's a little technical, but you only need, this is a procedure that you'd only need to do once. We explain how to do it, and that's how you would authenticate. And I think that is it for the demo.
Questions? Oh, no, we have more coming. We have more slides. Don't worry. Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
So I get the use case, the internal one, like wanting to let the person be able to query top 100 salespeople in Canada.
Yep.
So in an internal use case makes a ton of sense.
Yep.
When it's out there in the wild and you're letting people at hackathon or maybe partners come, are you going to build out some kind of team management or some other kind of layer?
So that's exactly what Todd just showed you. So for the hackathon, everybody had to register they usually had to register their team. They register their app with the HHBound Hackathon, and then they would request the access token, they get the access token, and then every time they want to make a request after that, they would have to use that.
Okay, so it's all, anybody from the outside that registers an app is token based?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. And that token expires within a year, so if it ever expires, you just request another one.
Do you think that being able to change data is something, like you mentioned rate limiting, is that something that you'll sort of want to control? Like not everyone can insert records or change the data, it's sort of on a selective basis or something. Could be some admin role there or something.
Yeah, definitely down the line. Right now, you can hack it right now by just having a different API for the read request and a separate API for the write
Yeah.
or delete But absolutely, down the line, we should implement an access control system where people have
So
certain privileges.
anyone can register an app to get data or within some scope, but.
Almost like a visibility thing, where basically if you have certain permissions, you can see these endpoints. That's a very good idea, actually. Yeah?
That's great.
Yeah, and I know with OAuth, you can probably do a lot of like token refreshes, so I know a year sounds like a long time, but you know, until it expires, then usually.
Do you think it should be even longer lived? Like,
No, I think you should, you know, with OAuth, there's flows for like token refresh and
Oh.
ways to kind of re-authenticate, so.
do you think we could actually shorten it then for security purposes?
I don't know, you
Or for
could.
the purpose of somebody's token not expiring in a year and
Yeah.
pulling the carpet out from under them. If it expires in a day, you know they'll catch that bug quickly.
That's actually good feedback.
Or at this point, I might even use like basic authentication on nation requests. So instead of just go on flow.
You mean basically we made like that old school, like, the old school HTTP authentication? Huh.
We've gotten feedback from one of our clients that they wanted OAuth. Probably just, well, I mean, it's secure and it's like well known.
Yeah.
So.
But when you're talking about HTTP, so if you went to the endpoint page, they would have that little pop-up of username, password. That is not a bad idea, actually, and it's actually a lot cheaper than OAuth and a lot easier to use. That could be something we can do.
So they would go.
IBM had it all over the place. I know about it.
Well, they already have to log into our site to use it there, and then there's a basic authentication header you're sending with the programmatic request.
Could be a configurable.
Yeah.
That's good feedback. Thank you.
On the same thread about security,
Yep.
what stops me from doing SQL injection attacks?
Well, so we do have basic SQL injection attacks. Well, we basically do have like prevention business attacks.
Like it catches the obvious drop table.
Yes.
Start from users or something like that.
So right now we are kind of the mind. You're creating this API and you're releasing it. So if you want to release to everybody, that's kind of like we haven't got there quite yet. So right now we're kind of like buyer beware. Like if you want to release it to the world, then you have to be ready for that.
But we do prevent SQL injection.
Yes, we do prevent that. But if someone that keeps like slamming your database, like we have ways of revoking their access, we should add something like rate limiting in there eventually. But that's a very good point. But kind of right now, it's kind of like, we don't want to take away people's, like for example, would we prevent create tables or drop tables?
Yeah.
At this point, we actually want to keep it very powerful for people to make these prepared statements or these drop table statements. Like say you were talking to me earlier about like maybe making temporary tables pop up and things like that. So that's good feedback though.
Well, also keep in mind that I was talking to this point earlier was, you know, do what you want to do, but there's a whole ecosystem of other people who have built things like rate throttling and monetization over this. I think I mentioned the 3Scale stuff.
Yep.
So, I mean, like, be proficient in the thing that you know you're going to kill the market on. It's going to be awesome for you guys. And then that acts as a business opportunity for you to work with those folks too, to figure out how to provide a partnership whereby people understand you guys don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. You know? So,
That's a good point.
the build your own API thing is actually pretty cool, especially if it's web-based, this portable.
Yeah, you think so?
Edge.
I really appreciate that. I really appreciate any feedback. Think so?
Who do you see as your target users? Is it, you know, a startup that needs to create an API really quickly that needs to be secure? Is it like a giant organization where people have spreadsheets and databases that are just kind of sitting there and they want to turn them into an API? Is it like real heavyweight production APIs? Like,
So clearly, so first a couple of things. So let's be honest. So right now we're really just targeting small to medium-sized businesses because the Coca-Colas of the world, they have the money to either have their dev team to throw it in to make their own API, or they can hire the Masheries or the Apogees or what have you to build their own. So we're really targeting small to medium-sized businesses. Now, clearly, we're also targeting these small to medium-sized businesses who have who wants this kind of like data API. Because clearly, if you want to have an API with business logic, we don't really support that right now. At best, you should probably just build a web app that does that. So that's a very good point. What we're finding is we're attracting a lot of startups with people who I know I need an API, I just don't have time to do it, or the expertise. Like we really just want to get one up. And especially because actually we've had a lot of people come to us saying, some people are like, I don't even know what an API is, but my vendor told me he needs an API to interact with me. So they come to us like, how do I build this? Half of our Google AdWords are like, how do I build an API? And then they see us like, oh, I have a database, why can't I do this? And then they give it to the technical guy and they talk with us and they get set up.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So that's from the provider perspective.
Yep.
From the consumer perspective, like the people that these APIs are being built for. You know, you told a story about somebody who's like, I want top 100 rows.
Yep.
So what, they're gonna log into this application as well? Or is there, I mean, is that half the reason why OAuth, you guys are providing OAuth support over those APIs? Because people are gonna wanna consume this from like spreadsheets. Those same people that are like, can I have that via email? Are gonna be asking for that to pump into Excel or something like that, you know?
Yes.
So is there support, or do you have it on the roadmap at all to connect directly from like OpenOffice or from Excel right into the API?
So there's two things here. So you can have an OAuth API and have a non-technical person just log into our site and get the data. They don't have to do any OAuth things. Basically, if you log in, they're kind of authenticated. And that's explicitly why we have download CSV, just for those spreadsheet purposes. Now, having Excel connect directly into our thing, that's very interesting, because one direction we've kind of talked about is kind of having a Dropbox connector. We've learned about all these companies who use Dropbox as kind of like some sort of like a rudimentary API. Somebody drops a file on there, and somehow, I didn't know this exists, I'm not an Excel guy, but somehow an Excel can grab that and ingest it. So we're actually thinking of maybe having like a Dropbox style connector where somebody's pumping in data programmatically, and it just shows up in your Dropbox, you can get it that way. That's very interesting. You even thought about it too. That's another like proof point that we have.
Yeah, another piece of feedback, I'm not sure if you guys are doing this already, make it very simple for the user. So I saw a lot of JSON format.
Yep.
XML format is still very alive.
You think so, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, and it's very easy to support.
Yeah, I get it.
Even simpler than that, just HTML tables. You know what I mean? If your end user is a business analyst who doesn't know what an API is, forget the whole Excel, CSV, JSON, just HTML table. You know what I mean?
That's really good. That's really, and XML too, because like you said, like XML is super cheap to add. We already have the harder parts.
Yeah, they're both pretty cheap to implement. So.
But I never even thought about the HTML tables. That could be really cool. And like another direction we could possibly go into is kind of like have these, not only do we have endpoints, but also kind of like visualization endpoints.
Yeah.
So for example, we have an endpoint that shoots out data, but maybe you have an endpoint that shoots out a pie chart or shoots out a graph. That could be kind of cool. So yeah, we're kind of always learning about our customers and seeing what they want, but that's very good feedback.
It's been almost 10 years since I tried this site, so they may have changed it.
Pardon me?
Sorry. It's been probably 10 years since I tried this site, they may have changed it, but I remember in the past, this sounds so retarded, but if you spit out the right MIME type for an Excel spreadsheet and then follow that with an HTML table, Excel will load it like a spreadsheet and like color the cells and stuff. So it shows right up for a business user.
From a URL? From a URL?
Yeah, like from HTML, like your file, your PHP or whatever, could spit out the right MIME type, follow with TD, TR, blah 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 blah, and it will load like it was an Excel spreadsheet.
Ha! That's really cool.
It's a dumb hack, but and then they may well have changed it in the past, 10 years or whatever.
And just to make sure everyone heard that, basically saying that if you formatted an HTML table, apparently Excel can ingest it automatically. You just have to ingest it
If you spit out the right MIME type.
with the right
Oh,
MIME
yeah,
type.
this is totally an Excel file,
They ingest OData naturally though.
Which kind of data? OData?
OData.
What's OData?
That's true. What is OData?
Sorry, yeah.
It's a Microsoft-centric thing.
Oh, okay.
It's an open standard for like, essentially like, object information with relational stuff.
Yeah.
But it's not so highly Microsoft-centric as it used to be with like data sets and stuff. But the point is, Excel can ingest these things like, they've always been able to ingest HTML tables for a long time now. And CSV files are kind of obvious, but again, that's flat transactional sort of when I need it kind of thing. This is more like, when I open the spreadsheet, it should be able to automatically pull from an API the latest data and then do the transformation, do the visualization on that. Let them do the visuals.
Yeah, I could.
In fact,
Yeah.
Tableau, have you seen that?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, blows your hair back.
But everyone keeps asking me, are you a competitor to Tableau? And we go, no.
Tableau, we're a provider
Yes.
to Tableau. Like, connect into that ecosystem any way you get. They support OData as well.
Thank you, yeah. And going back to one of your points too, I think I saw this in my internet, whatever, travels. I think I said you can actually put in a URL somewhere, it can pull it automatically. And like you're saying, if we can hook up the visualization, that'd be righteous. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
Say I take my shoe catalog database and I put it on Appetite, and I have a public API, and I want to share it with other people. Do I have to like send my users through your site? Is there sort of wrap you the appetite URLs and my own URLs? Like, do you sort of need like documentation that I can provide to my users, or is it just like go to Appetite's site, log in, and find my API and Appetite?
Well, if it's a public API, you can just send them to the /API in your API name, and there you have like a whole, I guess Todd showed that whole description of all the endpoints you have there. Now, that is the documentation part of your question. Now, you can wrap it in an iframe, I guess, if you wanted to. I guess the only thing is if you want to make it private, then they have to kind of log into a system or use the access
I would
token.
say if it was a public API,
Yeah.
do my customers have to know that Appetite is behind the scenes, or can I offer it as though it's my own API?
The way I would do that, if I were to do that right now, is it would be some, not DNS, but some sort of like path thing. You can just use our API URLs and just put your API URLs right over them. Especially if you're just looking at the JSON data straight up, they don't even have to know it's coming from Appetite, and we don't care. Like, we want you guys to use it properly.
I guess my only other suggestion would be to try and spit out like a Swagger spec or something that I can then turn into, interactive documentation that I can host on my own site.
Swagger spec, okay. To be honest with you, I've only started hearing about Swagger tonight.
Yeah.
And I know that's probably pretty surprising because it's an API meetup. But I have to check that out. Now, you know something interesting too, because like, for example, if you want to make a site with Google or Heroku, you can say, here's my custom URL, and somehow they do the routing to that. Now, that'd be very interesting too. Like, if I have, like you were saying, like, if I have my company URL, I can maybe have an endpoint that looks like that.
Just for transparency's sake, where are you hosting this stuff?
Heroku.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So it's highly scalable.
Yep, just got to flip the little slider up. It's on Heroku. We use Node.js. Now, if it ever gets any more heavyweight, we'll probably go to Java or one of those guys. We run a MongoDB on the back end. Thanks. We use Twitter Bootstrap, obviously, for the front end. Anything else with pointing out? No, really.
Nope.
So I'm going to skip the slide. We all know the benefits of an API. We're at an API meetup. Now, I know this probably, you guys all raised your hands to the technical thing. Now, you guys probably do very technical things. So this probably went through your mind at one point or other. Why would I ever use this? Why can't I just build my own? Like, you guys are all technical people. We're on a Tuesday night talking about APIs, right? So are you shaking your head?
No, I mean, I've only got so many hours in a day, so this is useful for me for very specific.
Oh, good. I think you're shaking your head for the wrong reasons. Okay, good. So I think that people like, I just want to, people think like, I can do this myself. Like, I can whip up an API in a day or something like that. So next slide. So that really comes down to things like, you probably could whip an API up very quickly. Now, what does that mean though? Can you have a full API that's tested? Can you have a full API with OAuth that has user access, kind of like we do? So it really comes down to this trade-off. Like, do you want to do it yourself, like put the API development, manage the security, the hosting? Like, if you host it yourself, you have to find a box somewhere, install all the data. If you do cloud hosting, you have to go do that. That costs money. Or you pay a little bit of a nominal fee and use our service. Now, like if you're paying an engineer, let's say $100,000 a year, that means every day they're worth, what, $270 roughly? It takes you 3 days to make an API, which is very quickly, end-to-end OAuth everything, which I doubt. Let's say 3 days. That's roughly $600. Now our business plan is $50 a month. That's $600 for the year. So the trade-off is huge. You guys are all very talented people. You should be helping out your customers, not building APIs for your. That's kind of that's the value proposition of our company right now. And I'm just kind of beating the dead horse on this one. Like, you have to implement it. You got to deploy it somewhere. And like I said, deploying it within a production system it's not always easy. You have to find a way to host it. Maintenance too. So the other thing too is that we want to make this very flexible. You saw that Todd wanted to filter out the stack traces. He just went in and changed the query super quick, and he was able to get that out. Say that non-technical person wanted to get only the candidate people. I can change that query super quick, and it gets propagated automatically. That's the kind of the power that we're trying to show here. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry.
Is there a sandbox way for me to like start messing with those queries?
Absolutely. So we actually have a little slider called test mode and live mode. Every API started in test mode. That means only you can see the changes, only you can see the data. And then when you're ready for production, you go live mode, then anybody can see it. And at any point you're like, oh crap, I'm releasing credit cards, you can just turn it off again.
And the endpoints themselves have test and live mode too, so you can turn off specific endpoints too, while keeping your whole API still active. Was there a question back there?
I was actually going to ask the same thing. Because I was wondering about, not just testing before you go live, but also versioning. So if you want to change something, you can make those changes, or you can change your access. So,
So a couple of things that you said, that versioning is something that we haven't really thought about. Now, the cheap, quick, and dirty way of doing it, you just make a new API /v2 or something like that. You can obviously pull an API back into test mode, but that means you probably have two databases running, one with the old version and one with the new version. So I'm guessing you would have to just make the new API with the new version. I'm not quite sure if I'm answering your question, though.
Well, I think it's I guess the biggest, the overall question that I have is versioning. So you start off with your API, you want to update it. Is there a way, I think going back to the sandbox idea, is there a way to do that? Is there a way to go into test mode and launch a new version, modify your API, still be able to test it while the other one is live, or your version 1 is live?
There isn't a way right now, although I can imagine us fairly easily adding a copy API command, so you can make a new API and then start making your changes on the new one.
And then when you're ready, you would change, like, say you had, like, the new API was, like, version 2, you would just change the name to the production one, maybe. That's the cheap way of doing that, but we haven't really thought about either.
Yeah, that's good feedback, thank you.
This is great feedback, though. This is huge, guys. Thank you very much. Next. Oh, and just one more quick use case, and I talked to two people, but one was my cousin, the other one was a real use case, but he's an industrial engineer, and they do efficiency with industrial. So if they go to companies that work on trucks, and they say, how long did it take to make this engine? They'll go, I don't know. I just make it, and they send it to the next guy. Well, they start adding instrumentation. They're like, okay, it took you an hour to make this engine, but Tuesday took you 2 hours. What happens? Like, oh, well, this machine is broken. Well, they say, hit the stop button, go fix it. So long story short is they have all this instrumentation, and by the end of it, they put all these stats into a web app that the management can see. Is like, oh, look, you guys are getting better. Your efficiency is getting better. So basically what one person does for this web app is they go into this SAP database, they extract the data, and then they make this web app. And this guy has to go into an SAP database like every other week. Every time he's at a new company, he's got to go to a new database. So another example, I was talking to with a lady in Seattle. She does POS machines, and they are hooked into a number of different heterogeneous databases. One's like Postgres, one's MySQL, one's SQL Server, and same thing. They always have like the custom solution at the end, but it's just munging the data and getting it out and putting to a common format is what's taking them a lot of time. So we were thinking, like with our thing, you can just kind of hook into the database and then translate it into that common format so it always spits out into that templated custom solution you have. So then you can spend more time making that custom solution to what the customer wants rather than just always getting the data out. You can kind of free up your engineers for that. And then, next slide. So yeah, thank you very much. This is basically the conclusion of the talk. Thank you very much for coming out. I really want to thank SmartBear. And just to thank you all guys, you guys can have 3 free months of our business plan, a retail value of $150. So email Todd, and thank you very much for the feedback. This has been great feedback. And yeah, cheers. Any questions? Any questions about more general things, about startups and things like that? Cool. Thanks for coming out.
I
Yeah.
do have a question about this. So, aside from your products, so it's a pretty bold move to actually walk away from IBM.
Yes.
And I think,
These guys are doing it, yeah.
What are the Lucy Bot guys can relate to this too? So, I mean, you just kind of threw it all up in the air and said, let's just start our own business. I mean, what does it take to do that? Is that you had an idea and you really felt there was a business case and you didn't have the room and idea to do that?
Actually, to be honest with you, we were a very special position at IBM. We were in the research group. We basically had, it was actually pretty ridiculous. We had someone called it like, it was a very good job, tons of flexibility, the hours were great, and the pay was really good. So a lot of people think we're actually very crazy, and we probably really are. But things were a little too cozy. Like my thing was I felt like I was retiring a little bit too early. I don't mean to say that badly. I've been no qualms about them, but I just felt like I wasn't learning enough. I'm like, I really wanted to get out there. And like I went to a bunch of startup talks. I'm like, wow, these guys are like always going, and they're always like being motivated and things like that. So that's what it was. And like the good news is that like we left on pretty good terms. So if this ever fails, we can always try to go back with our tail between our legs.
Right.
And also like we're in very unique situations. Like I feel like we're at that perfect intersection of youth and experience. Like I'm not that young anymore. But I feel like I'm young enough so I still have the energy, but I have enough experience so I can kind of talk about these things. I also have a great wife. That helps a lot too. We talked about this a lot. She's the breadwinner. You know, like Todd's on his own though.
Yeah, I would say that, I don't know, it just felt nice to, it's really best, I found, not to think about it too much. That's the way I go for it, because you always doubt whether it was the right move or not. Well, one thing is we are in a great industry.
Great city too, actually.
A great city. Right, and startups, fail all the time, and we don't think for a second we will, but if we did, we can always get back into industry. It's not as big a risk as in other sectors.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, we don't want to sound arrogant, but like tech jobs are very in demand right now. We will probably be okay. And I'm not trying to sound arrogant. This is the way the nature is right now.
But it definitely is still a jump. Like we don't make, for practical reasons, we don't really make money right now. So
if anything, we actually lose money. We lose a lot of money.
So we're just burning through our savings right now, and then things cost a lot more once you leave your job than you can realize. So.
Have you done funding at all?
Not yet.
Not yet. And there's like part of it's not like some of it's not by choice, and some of it is. Like funding we're finding out is very tough. We're thinking about it. We don't think we're ready. We don't have enough compelling stuff to bring to a funding. We say like we have this and we have this as our model and we want to do that. So we're just trying to figure that part out so we can go get funding from maybe angels or something like that.
Right. We're still waiting for that initial traction to make us appealing.
We're going to apply to Mass Challenge, which is the deadline's in a month. You guys are probably looking at that too. We're competing. But like I have to say, like it's I work all the time, but it's amazing. And I don't mean to say that like. I used to be sent out from IBM to conferences all the time, and I'm like, why am I seeing this talk? Why do I need to meet these people? Now it's completely different. I get to meet you guys here, and I'm actually like, this is exciting. This is fun. I wake up every day. I get emails, and it's like this sounds lame, but it's like Christmas. Like it's all about business, and it's kind of I don't know. But the risks are a lot higher too. Before I used to give a talk, and as long as my manager was happy, that was fine. But now, if I give a talk, I have to make sure like I'm selling something or I'm getting the point across. So the stakes are higher, but it's real. It's just I don't know. It's very invigorating.
I hope no one.
Don't quit your job at SmartBear though. This looks like a good company.
Yeah, this is a really nice space out here.
Yeah.
Well, you've heard this enough, I'm sure, but seriously, anytime you want to come back, any kind of other ideas for meetups we have, this is a good space. And
Thank you.
You heard it from Doug, he's like, come back. Use our space and play. So.
Yeah, we're definitely going to come back to all the API Craft talks, meetups. Cool. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming out.
Cheers.